Welcome back to the channel, guys. We are going to do Unit 1, Paper 2, Past Paper, Environmental Science, year 2022. Please share and like the video, and also subscribe to the channel so I can be motivated to do more like this. Alright, so let us get into the question and answers. Alright, number one. So we are going to do just module 1 in this video, and you can look out for module 2 and 3. Alright, so let's proceed. Number 1 says, define the term commensalism. Alright, so as I have written here, the answer says, commensalism is a symbiotic relationship in which one organism benefits from the relationship while the other does not. And also, guys, please note that this relationship takes place between two species. Alright, so it is very simply, as you know, there are a number of relationships when dealing with organisms, right? They have in general what is called symbiosis. Now, there are a number of symbioses. We have about 3 of them. We have parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism. Now, the question here is focusing on commensalism, and of course, with this type of relationship, one organism benefit while the other does not. It is not harmed, but it does not benefit. One benefit and one don't. Alright, part 2 of the questions reads, state one example of a relationship that involves commensalism. Alright, of course, I gave you 2. So the first one here, which is on plants, we have orchards attached to trees to get water that drip from the top of trees. So this is a commensalism relationship in which the orchards, which are some flowers or small plants that live on large trees, and the large trees do not benefit from the relationship, but the orchards do. An example of an animal is the goby species living among the spines of the toxic sea urchins and gain protection from their host. Again, the sea urchins, which we commonly call sea eggs, don't benefit from the relationship, but the goby species, they do. They gain protection from these sea urchins because the sea urchins have spines or macas that will run off predators. Alright, let's move to part B of question 1. Part B says, explain one way in which an increase in nitrogen in the nitrogen cycle could affect each of the following. Alright, number 1, it said the biotic potential of the population. So let's just delve into the answer for this. But what you need to understand is that the point is, once there's an increase in the nitrogen cycle, then the end result is that the environment will become unbalanced or harmed. All right, so I want you to hold that point in mind while we look at the answers. So I'm just going to read what I wrote. So before I go into answering the question directly, I made a definition and a statement. Alright, so let me read the definition of biotic potential. Biotic potential is the maximum rate at which population can increase when resources are unlimited and when environmental conditions are ideal. The second point that I made now is that normally an increase in the nitrogen cycle would be caused by human activities, such as, for example, when we use fertilizer or when we burn fossil fuels. Alright, so what it is saying, guys, is that the nitrogen cycle it functions without human activity. So without us doing anything to the environment, there's a nitrogen cycle that exists. Now, there are times when naturally we can have a disruption of the cycle. It can happen naturally by natural disaster, etc. But apart from natural disaster, human being activities affect it most. All right, and so the effect is that can be negative and positive, but of course it will make the environment unstable. So let's go into the answer, the direct answer. So it says here, nitrogen fixing bacteria found in the soil and roots of leguminous plants would increase their population rapidly. However, eutrophication will increase certain water plants will increase population, but other species, some fishes, would die because of the lack of oxygen due to the competition from the overgrown plants in the water. Hence, some species' biotic potential would increase while others would decrease, causing an imbalance in species diversity. Now, species diversity is higher when you have an evenness of the species. So if you have 50 fish, 50 frog, 50 plants, that is even, all right, as compared to each other. So when species diversity is even, the environment is more stable. But let's just assess the answer a little bit more. So what we're saying, guys, in the nitrogen cycle, of course, they have microbes in the soil that helps with the nitrogen cycle, right? So if there's an increase in nitrogen in the nitrogen cycle, of course, there will be an increase in some bacteria in the soil that function to convert these nitrogen. One example is the nitrogen fixing bacteria. Now, this bacteria, name of this bacteria is rhizobium. Now, this rhizobium bacteria lives in the roots of the plant. So, in other words, they are having a symbiotic relationship with the plant. So, both of them benefit. The legume plant keep the bacteria, give it housing, while the nitrogen fixing bacteria will convert nitrogen gas to ammonia and nitrates, which these plants absorb to make protein. Alright, so remember that in the nitrogen cycle, plants do not absorb the nitrogen gas. They absorb it in a solid state called nitrates. Now, these nitrogen fixing bacteria will help to convert that gas to nitrates. Now, the more nitrogen that is added to the cycle that exists already, these bacteria would benefit. In so doing, what will happen now, the more nitrogen gas you have, the more nitrates that can be formed, and so you will have more nutrients being produced in the soil. Now, when there's an increase of too much nutrients in the soil, some of it will definitely wash out, and that now will cause an imbalance to streams and rivers, in that it will result in eutrophication. Alright, so the result is going to be ended negatively when these nutrients go in the rivers. So a little positive is that plants that use these nutrients will get a lot of nutrients and will grow very rapidly, because nitrogen will grow leaf growth and stem. So plants will grow very rapid, but when the excess nutrients go in the water, that's where it becomes negative. Alright, let's proceed. Alright, so part 2 of the question says population growth in an ecosystem. So let's revise back the question. It says explain one way in which an increase in nitrogen cycle could affect each of the following. Alright, we already looked at one, but how could it affect population growth in the ecosystem? Alright, before we approach the answer directly, let's define population growth. Now, population growth is a change in the number of individuals in a population. This can be positive, which is an increase in the size of the population, or it can be negative, a decrease in the size of the population. So the question is basically asking you how an increase in nitrogen in the nitrogen cycle would affect population growth. Would it reduce population growth of plants or animals, or would it increase it? Now let's just address some of the situation. Now it says some soil organisms that are in symbiotic relationship, such as rhizobium bacteria that live in leguminous plant roots, will increase their population size in huge number. Alright, because these bacteria they feed directly on the nitrogen gas, and when they do so, they'll have more food. So definitely these bacteria will grow. The plants that absorb these nutrients on the soil will definitely grow. So the population size of plants that need the nitrogen will definitely grow. Alright, again now, the same thing in the water. Plants in the water that use the nitrogen like algae, they will grow. They will grow very rapidly. And then other organisms like fish can't compete for the oxygen because the plants are taking away all the oxygen. And so the fishes and jangas and so forth will die. Alright, so it's going to have an imbalance. So overall, guys, when you have an increase in the nitrogen cycle or a decrease, there are going to be some form of negative effects. Alright, the environment is not balanced, the ecosystem is not balanced. Alright, so let me finish with some soil organisms that are in symbiotic relationships, such as rhizobium bacteria that live in the leguminous plant roots, will increase their population size to a huge size. Also, aquatic plants that use excess nitrogen will increase population size greatly. While on the extreme, some organisms or species will reduce drastically. For example, fish, as they can't get enough oxygen because they are now competing with overgrown plants such as algae. Carrying capacity will boom and burst. Environmental sustainability will be disrupted. So when you have overgrown or eutrophication, carrying capacity of the environment will be affected. What happens is that this will basically affect the plant. The plant population will grow rapidly and then it will go past the carrying capacity, meaning the environment cannot maintain these overgrown plants. So they're going to start dying back. Or what will happen? You're going to have water pollution and the place is going to get stink, so it's going to burst. So I'm going to eventually some of these plants will die and come back down. Alright, let's move to part C of the question. It says, in 2018, there was a major tropical storm which destroyed most of the plant life of a Caribbean island. Explain two ways in which the decrease in the plant life on this island may impact the nitrogen cycle. Now, the word impact, guys, when you see impact in any question in environmental science, it means the negative effect. The negative effect, right? Now, let's look at that. Now, I said natural disasters similar to human activities can increase or decrease nitrogen level in the nitrogen cycle. Alright, so human activities, but if we don't curtail our behavior, we can affect the environment. And the same thing, when we have natural disasters, it affect or it result in negative effects on the environment. So number one, leguminous plants live symbiotically with nitrogen fixing bacteria. Thus, if these plants die, same will be these bacteria, and therefore the amount of nitrogen in the nitrogen cycle will decrease. These bacteria fix nitrogen gas, the nitrates, the form in which plants absorb nitrogen. Hence, nitrates in the soil will be reduced, reducing nitrogen in the nitrogen cycle. Lack of food will affect food chain. So what happens is that if these plants die, so will the bacteria die that depend upon them. What will happen? The environment will not produce enough food, so organisms will start dying from hunger or migrate to new environment, which we know that when we have introduced species into a new environment, the new environment can become disrupted again because these new organisms will start feeding on or competing with existing organisms, and so put them under strain and pressure, right? So that's negative. Now the second point, it says if there are not enough plants, then cycling of protein will be short for us, animals, and other microbes that feed on it. Thus, nitrogen and cycling of nutrient will reduce. Nitrogen is used by plants to make protein. Without plant protein as food will eventually be short, reducing nitrogen in the nitrogen cycle, as there won't be any protein to be recycled to nitrogen. Alright, so plants use these nitrogen or convert nitrogen to protein, and we all know the function of protein. All living things feed on protein so they can build and repair their tissues. Alright, so we know that carbon is used to make sugar in plants, starch, but the nitrogen, plants use the nitrogen to make protein. Alright, so a decrease in plant life would decrease food, and again, that means the environment won't be able to sustain the living organisms that depend upon it. They will become unstable, and we're going to have problems. Let's move on. Alright, it says table 1 below show the numbers of two organisms X and Y in a population over a 6-month period. Table 1, number of selected organisms in a population over a 6-month period, and this is the table here. Alright, now let's read what they're asking us to do. It says 1, use the information in table 1 to plot a line graph for each of species X and species Y on the grid provided on page 7. Before we go to that, let me read part 2. It says part 2 says use the graph constructed for D1 to suggest the type of interaction which exists between species X and species Y. So of course, we can access the table before we start. They want a line graph. Fine. They want to compare the population of these two species. It could be two plant species or two animal species. Alright. Anyways, let's continue. Or it could be both. Alright, so it is a population, it's a comparison of the population of these two species over a period of time, right? So on the graph here, all we need to know is that we are looking at population versus time of two organisms. So you need to know which axis to put your population and which axis to put your time. Now if you look here, see we put population on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we put time. So remember that if you're going to draw a diagram similar to this, you need to know which axis to put population and time. And any graph you're going to do, guys, also study that, because you will get questions like this. You're going to get graphs to be done or diagrams, so bear that in mind. Alright, so after they are plotted, this shows you that over a period of time, the same thing happened with both species. Both of them increase in population size at the same time, and both of them decrease at the same time. Now, this is showing you the best answer for part 2 here, which is mutualism. Meaning, it says, let me repeat, it said use a graph constructed for D1 to suggest the type of interaction which exists between species A and species Y. Now, interactions, there are a few interactions that we have. We have mutualism, whereby both of them benefit from the relationship. Alright, so population size increase at the same time. If one go down population size, next one go down. If I go up, the next one go up. So when one is happy, both happy. When one is sad, both sad. All right. Now I'm just going to point out I put some other examples of relationships and how they would look on a graph just to help with your knowledge. So of course, there are some other relations, interactions. Of course, we pointed out now we would have symbiosis. So one example is mutualism, which we looked at a while ago. Of course, there is commensalism, which is this one here, and there's parasitism. All right, with commensalism, one organism will benefit while the other will not. So the yellow line here shows that this organism is not benefiting from the relationship. It's just on one level. While the other one here, the population size grows, which shows this one is benefiting. So one is benefiting, one remains constant. Parasitism would come almost like competition. Alright, so the next interaction, guys, know them, is competition. Now with competition, as you can see, one benefit over a period of time, and over a period of time, the other one will eventually die. So remember the law of competition exclusion. Two organisms will not be able to survive or compete and survive in the same environment. One will eventually die. So when it comes down and touch the line here, it means it die. So when it touch the x-axis, it means the population is at 0, die, while one benefit. Now, predator-prey relationship or interaction, while one population is up, the other one will go down. So it could look like this, or it could look like this. One is up, one is down. One is up, one is down. All right. All right. It says here, part 3 here says, state one reason for your answer in D2. Why we say it's mutualism? Because both species, when their population size grow, means both of them are benefiting from the relationship. So if one is grow, the other one will grow. If one fail, the other will fail. That's what it said. It said. All right. Question 2A1. It said, define the term ecotone. Now, ecotone is a transitional boundary between two ecological communities. Example, the joining of a desert and a forest. So that joining here is called a grassland, right? Between salt water and fresh water, estuary. So the estuary is the ecotone. Between dry and wet ecosystem, marshlands is the ecotone. So in between these two environments, we have marshland. Between terrestrial and marine ecosystem, we have mangrove forest. Now, if you do some research, you can find that more. But these are just two examples of ecotones in the Caribbean. They are like borders between two ecosystems. All right, they are borders. So these are the common ecotones: a grassland, an estuary, a marshland, or mangrove. And you need to know them, guys. So, all right. So these are two examples. There are more you can research those. All right. B. It says student in sixth form class conducted a field exercise using an area outside of their school shown in figure 2. This area consisted of two forest areas, ecosystem 1 and ecosystem 2, separated by a grassland. Alright, so guys, assess the diagram. Alright, let's move to the question. It says, question 1. Briefly outline one method which the student may use to determine the number of organisms for particular species of plant in the area in figure 2. Now, I'm going to start by telling you which of the method is most suitable. So, the belt transect method is the most suitable method to use, and I'm going to explain why that is. It says, this method gives information on species abundance as well as presence or absence of species. A series of quadrats are used to find the number of species present or absent. Alright, so why this method is suitable in short is that when you use this method actually involves you counting the amount of plants. So if you look here, it says they want to tell the number of organisms. So the bell transect will definitely tells you the amount of organism present in the area. Plus, it will tell you if it is present or absent. So it gives you a lot of information. The evenness, the abundance, if it is absent or present, the amount of organism present, etc. Now, there's another one that might confuse some of the students. This is the line transect method. Now, the line transect method is not suitable because with the line transect method, guys, the line transect method only tells you if the plant or organism is present or not. It does give you a count of the amount that are there or not. Alright, so it is very limited. And for those who don't know a quadrant will look something like this. Alright, part 2 of the question said the student investigated the number of organisms of species A to F in each of the ecosystem and obtained the results shown in table 2. So after they use the quadrant method, they compile this information and compile information in this table. Alright, so from this table, let's assess the table. It says there are type of species found in the area A, B, C, D, E, F. So we have 6 species found here, maybe 6 plants, right? I'm gonna use the quadrant method for plants, but anyway, it says they have 6 different type of plants were found, and these are the results. Now, what they ask you to do is to calculate the species diversity for ecosystem 2. So we're going to calculate species diversity for these 2, and the method they give, the formula is the Simpson diverse index formula here. Now, in short, guys, let us look what these symbols stands for. So hen here is the total number of individuals of the species present. So of course you're going to get that, you'll have to add up all of these, and what you get would be capital N. Now the smaller hen is the total number of individuals of a particular species. So each one here would be N. 21 would be N for species A, 20 would be for species B, etc. Alright, so let's continue. And this symbol here means the sum of. So all you do, guys, you'd plug in your information gradually here. When you reach this stage, you just divide the top number by the bottom number. And what you get here is your species diversity. Alright, so for the answer, you should get 6.051. Now I went further and I calculated for the other species here, which we got 2.620. Can you tell me which one have a higher species diversity? I bet you can. The one with the larger number would have the higher species diversity. So this ecosystem 2, guys, is much better, or is more diverse than species A. Now to help you with that definition, I'm going to explain why it is more diverse. The next part of the question will explain why. I said calculate the species abundance for ecosystem 1. Alright, so species abundance means the total amount of species in each ecosystem. So if you add up this, you should get 100 here. So if you add up all of that, you should get 100. So the abundance there is 100, right? And if you want to do it for ecosystem 2 again, you add up all of those, you should get 100. Alright, now species abundance, as they ask you down here, is the total amount of species found in the ecosystem. Alright, so we all know it's 100 now, but if you want to find out now, they might ask you to find the relative abundance, meaning the abundance of each species as compared to each other. For example, A compared to F, how comparable are they? Are they even in number or far apart? So as you can see, this is far apart. Now, in order to calculate the percentage of how far apart they are to each other, then you would calculate what is called relative abundance. So that would be this formula: number of individual species over the total number of species collected times 100. Of course, when I add up all of this, you get back the 100. So the answer is 100. You just add all of these and you get 100. Alright? Let's continue. It says now, part 4 says, explain the relationship between species diversity and species abundance. Now, guys, the thing about species diversity and species abundance is that if, let me read it, it says the relationship here, it says, the abundance of species of a particular species is inversely related to the total diversity of the community. Now, in other words, guys, diversity of the community, if the organisms are even in number to each other, it's more diverse than an environment that is not even. I so explain evenness to you. Alright, so what this is saying, the relationship is that if one organism is too much compared to the others, if one is too much and one is too little, then that ecosystem will not be very diverse. That's what it's saying. Let me show you from the diagram here. The table here is what it's saying. Now we prove this, show you that when we do the calculation here, when we did it, we know that ecosystem 2 is more diverse than ecosystem 1. But let me explain now the abundance. What they are saying now in regards to the relationship with abundance and species diversity is that if you have one species that is too high in number, this is 59, and those that are too small, one too big and one too small, or a number of them too large and you have some too small, the species diversity will be less. It is less diverse. Over here is more diverse. What this means, guys, is that this is more even. What we mean by even is that if all of them is like close to each other in number, it means even. You know what even? If all of them is 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, you know that is perfectly even. But this is A is 21, B is 20, you know that's not far. It's almost even. 19, that's almost even. That's not far. We have 13, 13, 14. These are close. So because the number of each organisms are close in number to each other in amount, it is more diverse. So the relationship, guys, with abundance and diversity is that if one organism is too much in number than the rest in that ecosystem, it will be less diverse. But if they are more even in number, they will be diverse. That's what they're saying. Now let's look at the definition of these terms in case you walk again. So it said species abundance. Species abundance is the total number of organisms in an area. It does not matter what species they are. So once I calculate the total number, that species abundant. So up here, no matter what the evenness may be, we know that ecosystem 2 is more even and more diverse, but both of them have an abundance of 100. Both of them have the same abundance. It's just that one is more even and one is not. So the one that's more even would be more diverse. Species richness is the number of different species in an area. It doesn't matter how abundant they are. Alright? Species diversity is both the number of species in an area and the evenness of their abundance. Okay? Good. Let's move on. Next question said, the teacher tells the student that species A in ecosystem 1 appear to be nearing its carrying capacity. Number 1, name 2 factors that may affect the carrying capacity of an ecosystem. Of course, guys, I gave you more than 2. So all these conditions in the ecosystem would be affecting the carrying capacity of the environment. So water, but first, so we have water, space, nutrient, drought, flood, temperature extremes, whether it be too rainy or too wet, too dry, right? Now let's also go and define carrying capacity. Now carrying capacity is the maximum population size an environment can sustain without any harm to it. So an ecosystem, guys, you know, an ecosystem might have plants, living organisms, soil, birds, you know, an ecosystem. Now, when you speak about carrying capacity of an ecosystem, mean that the ecosystem can sustain life, maybe life for the animals, life for the bacteria, life for the plants. It can sustain itself, and for the animals and everything that is in it can sustain itself without any harm coming to the ecosystem. Meaning, no lack of food, no lack of space, no lack of nutrients. It's like a perfect environment. So when an ecosystem reaches its carrying capacity, it means everything is balanced. No stress, no lack of food, no lack of nutrient, no drought, temperature just nice. Alright? That's when the population, when our ecosystem has carrying capacity. Right? Right. Alright, let's move to part we said. Outline how each factor named in C1 affect carrying capacity of the ecosystem. Now, meaning all these factors up here help the ecosystem to strive and be in balance. One, plant nutrients. Now, how can plant nutrient affect the environment, keeping in balance and or keeping it out of balance? Now, plant nutrients, if there are too much of one nutrient, so it's out of balance because it's too much, right? Too much of it can go in water streams, it can leach out, wash out, and that now will cause overgrowth of algae. The algae will compete with oxygen, killing off other organisms. So if organisms are dying, then you know it's not balanced. Too much are dying now when they should not. So it's a balance. Now that's going to lead to what is called pollution. Now the environment is now harming. Alright? So that's all that will be affecting it. Alright, so too much nutrient is not good. Now too little. What will happen is that there won't be enough food because if the plants can't get the nitrogen to grow, then it can't provide food for the other animals or even home. Right? So the right amount is good for sustaining carrying capacity. Too little or too much will affect it. Now on the other hand, drought, guys, another point is drought. Now if you have droughts, now droughts meaning long period without rain or water on the land. Now you know that plants will die. Now if plants die, animals will move from that area in search to go to other area, migrate. Now when they go to another area that is suitable, they will cause havoc. They will disrupt the food chain that exists in those ecosystems, causing problems. Alright, species diversity will be affected. The environment, no, because of the lack of species diversity, it will be prone to more like storms. It will be unstable. Alright. The next part here, part 3 says, describe how the process of natural selection may play a role in maintaining a viable population of species A at carrying capacity. Now guys, let me read what we have. It said organisms that survive in a particular environment will reproduce, passing on traits of adaptability to their offspring. These offspring, if survive, will reproduce and the cycle will continue. So what this is saying, guys, natural selection meaning the environment will exist, and if animals survive in that existing environment, then mean they can adapt to it. They can live in that environment. So everything will be in harmony. That's what it's saying. Now, the process of natural selection is always going to lead to these species now that survive will definitely reproduce. They will have babies. Now, these babies are offsprings. They will carry those traits of survivability. So they will be able to survive in that organism, in that environment, and the cycle will continue. They will continue to survive and live in harmony with the environment. right? So that is how it. Whoever survived the environment will reproduce, and the offspring will develop those traits to live, and they will reproduce. Once they live, they reproduce, and the cycle continues. Sustainability is maintained. All right, guys, I'm going to do another video with module 2 questions. Now, this is the ending of module 1. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and I'll post more videos like this. Thank you.